Most turning points never announce themselves with drama or warning. They slip in quietly at the exact moment people feel relaxed enough to stop paying attention. When certainty replaces curiosity and comfort, convinces everyone that nothing important is left to notice. That false calm is often the most dangerous part of any moment because it invites the mind to disengage while reality continues unfolding without permission. That feeling settled into the space that day. Conversations grew loose and careless, attention softened, and people mentally moved on, convinced the situation had already revealed everything it needed to reveal. The atmosphere felt ordinary, predictable, and finished, as if the moment had already closed its chapter. That assumption felt harmless, even sensible, but it quietly removed the one thing that mattered most. Awareness standing within that relaxed certainty was Bruce Lee, still, quiet, and completely present. He did not draw attention, demand space, or interrupt the flow of the room. There was no urgency in his posture, and no signal asking to be taken seriously. And that absence of urgency is what made the moment so dangerous, because when nothing appears to demand caution, people stop watching just before everything changes. Comfort is one of the most powerful forces in any environment, because it disguises itself as safety. When people feel safe, their minds begin to relax, and that relaxation quietly changes how they interact with the world around them. Questioning slows down. Scanning the environment feels unnecessary. Adjusting to new information seems like extra effort. The brain, always seeking efficiency, convinces itself that the situation has already been understood and neatly stored away. Once that internal decision is made, awareness begins to loosen its grip. This shift does not happen abruptly. Attention does not vanish in an obvious way. Instead, it fades gradually, almost politely. People continue to look, but they stop truly seeing. Sounds still reach their ears, but the meaning behind those sounds is no longer processed with care. Reactions become automatic rather than intentional. Observation is replaced by assumption, and assumption feels easier because it removes the need for effort. Comfort creates the illusion of stability. It tells people that nothing unexpected can happen because everything already makes sense. This illusion is convincing because it feels calm rather than careless. People believe they are being reasonable, not reckless. They trust their initial judgment and see no reason to revisit it. Familiarity becomes mistaken for understanding, and predictability replaces curiosity. As this comfort settles in, the room itself seems to relax. Body language softens. Conversations drift. Focus shifts away from the present moment and toward whatever feels more interesting or familiar. The collective energy becomes loose and unguarded. No one announces this change, and no one consciously chooses it. It emerges naturally as a result of shared certainty. What makes this state so dangerous is that it feels earned. People believe their comfort is justified because nothing has challenged it yet. They interpret the absence of disruption as proof that their assumptions are correct. In reality, the absence of disruption is often the result of missed signals rather than actual safety. Comfort does not confirm understanding, it merely reduces vigilance. Once awareness thins, the room becomes psychologically disarmed, not because anyone intends harm, but because no one is prepared for change. The ability to notice subtle shifts diminishes. Small changes in tone, posture, or energy go unregistered. The mind filters out anything that does not fit the settled narrative. This filtering feels efficient, but it creates blind spots. This is how moments slip past unnoticed. People remain present physically, but mentally they have moved on. They assume the situation will continue unfolding in a familiar way because nothing has contradicted that belief yet. They do not realize that reality does not require their attention to continue developing. It moves forward regardless, often in directions that only become obvious in hindsight. In that relaxed state, the room feels calm, but it is not alert. Calm without awareness is not stability. It is a vulnerability. When vigilance disappears, responsiveness follows. People are no longer ready to adapt because they believe adaptation will not be necessary. That belief becomes the room's weakest point. This is why comfort disarms so effectively. It does not create fear or tension that might prompt caution. It removes the very impulse to remain attentive. It convinces people that observation is no longer needed. And because this process feels natural and shared, no one notices when it happens. The illusion fully settles. The room relaxes into the belief that nothing important remains. Awareness thins to the point where it no longer tracks subtle change. And by the time anyone realizes that attention has faded, the moment has already moved beyond their understanding. This is how comfort disarms a room. Quietly, gradually, and almost always without being noticed. Reality does not pause when attention drifts away. It does not wait for permission, and it does not announce that it is continuing. It simply moves forward, quietly and steadily, regardless of whether anyone is watching closely enough to notice. When people disengage mentally, they often assume that nothing meaningful is happening. That assumption feels logical because nothing dramatic appears on the surface. Yet beneath that calm exterior, small shifts are always taking place. Details begin to change first. Body language adjusts. The rhythm of movement slows or tightens. The emotional temperature of a space subtly rises or falls. Intent becomes clearer, not through words, but through presence. These changes are rarely loud or obvious. They are felt rather than seen, and only by those whose attention remains anchored in the moment. Most people miss these signals because attention is demanding. It requires energy, patience, and a willingness to stay engaged, even when nothing seems urgent. Once people believe a moment is settled, they withdraw that effort. Their awareness turns inward or elsewhere, leaving the present moment unattended. Reality, however, continues unfolding in that unattended space. While others disengaged, Bruce Lee did not. He did not shift into anticipation or brace for confrontation. He was not planning his next move or preparing for a specific outcome. He was simply aware. His attention stayed connected to what was happening as it happened, without rushing ahead or drifting away. This kind of awareness is often misunderstood. It is not tension, and it is not readiness in the aggressive sense. It is openness. It is the ability to remain present without forcing the moment to become something else. Bruce Lee allowed the situation to reveal itself naturally, while others assumed it had already revealed everything it could. That difference created distance. Not physical distance, but mental distance. While others moved forward in their thoughts, Bruce Lee remained where the moment actually was. He continued to register changes that no longer registered for anyone else. The more others disengaged, the clearer those changes became to him. When attention leaves one side and remains with the other, balance shifts even if nothing outwardly changes. No one has to move for this shift to occur. No action is required. Awareness alone is enough. The side that continues watching gains clarity, while the side that stops watching loses responsiveness. This imbalance grows quietly, unnoticed by those who believe the moment has already ended. People often associate advantage with speed or action. In reality, advantage frequently belongs to the one who remains attentive the longest. When awareness stays active, it gathers information continuously. When awareness fades, information stops flowing. The gap between those two states widens naturally. As the room relaxed, reality continued adjusting itself. Energy redistributed. Intent sharpened. The situation evolved beyond the assumptions that had been made about it. Those who had disengaged could not see this evolution because they were no longer looking for it. Their understanding froze at an earlier stage, while the moment itself moved forward. Bruce Lee's awareness did not demand recognition. It did not need to be seen to be effective. It simply kept him aligned with what was real, rather than what was assumed. That alignment meant he understood the moment more accurately than anyone else present. This is why reality continuing unseen is so powerful. It creates a gap between perception and truth. People believe they understand what is happening because nothing contradicts their assumption yet. Meanwhile, the moment has already changed shape beneath their notice. By the time attention returns, it often returns too late. Reality has already advanced beyond the point where assumptions still apply. Those who stopped watching are forced to catch up, while those who remained attentive never fell behind. This is what continues when no one is looking, not chaos. Not drama, but quiet progression. And in that progression, awareness becomes the deciding factor, long before anyone realizes a decision has been made. Most people expect power to announce itself. They are trained to recognize it through volume, movement, and display. A raised voice signals authority. Strong gestures suggest confidence. Clear reactions reassure the room that control is present. When those signals appear, people know where to look and how to respond. When they do not appear, the mind often assumes that nothing important is happening. This expectation shaped how the room interpreted silence. Because no dramatic signal appeared, people concluded there was nothing to track. They believed power would make itself visible if it existed. When it didn't, attention drifted away. Silence in their understanding meant absence. What they failed to recognize was that silence can also be deliberate. Silence can be chosen. Silence can be a form of control that does not seek permission to exist. Bruce Lee offered no signals because he did not need to. He did not react because the reaction would have fed the assumptions already forming. He did not correct anyone because correction would have turned the moment into performance. His silence was not emptiness. It was containment. Control does not require expression to be real. It requires awareness. Bruce Lee's silence held awareness intact while the room released it. That difference mattered more than any visible action could have. While others searched for signs and found none, he remained connected to what was actually unfolding beneath the surface. People often confuse movement with power. Because movement is easy to observe, silence demands patience to understand. When the room failed to receive obvious cues, it stopped looking altogether. That created a blind spot. In that blind spot, attention faded, assumptions hardened, and curiosity disappeared. Bruce Lee stayed within the moment, instead of ahead of it or outside it. He did not mentally move on simply because nothing dramatic occurred. He allowed silence to slow perception rather than end it. This choice kept his awareness alive while others allowed theirs to rest. The advantage formed quietly because it was internal. Awareness sharpened while assumptions stagnated. As the room settled into a fixed interpretation, Bruce Lee remained flexible. Flexibility is not visible, but it is decisive. It allows perception to adjust as reality shifts. Assumption resists adjustment because it believes no adjustment is necessary. Silence protected that flexibility. Without reacting, Bruce Lee avoided narrowing the moment. He did not collapse possibilities into a single narrative. He allowed multiple outcomes to remain open, and openness creates clarity. When nothing is forced, everything becomes visible to the attentive mind. This is why silence created advantage. Not because it intimidated anyone, but because it removed distraction. Without noise, without reaction, without performance, the moment revealed itself honestly. Bruce Lee could see what others missed, because he never stopped paying attention. While the room relaxed into certainty, he stayed present without effort. Presence does not strain. It listens. It observes, it registers subtle change. That presence allowed him to notice shifts in energy and tension and awareness that no longer registered for anyone else. Advantage did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated. Every second of sustained attention widened the gap between understanding and assumption. The room did not realize it was falling behind because falling behind feels like standing still. Only later does the distance become apparent. People often believe advantages must be taken. In truth, it is often granted by those who stop looking. Silence does not seize control. It receives it when others abandon it. Bruce Lee did not step forward to claim anything. He remained still and allowed attention to drift away from everyone else. That is why no action was required. No display was necessary. No correction was made. The advantage existed before anyone noticed it because awareness had been preserved where it mattered. The advantage was not created by silence itself. It was created by what silence protected: attention, clarity, connection to the moment as it truly was, not as it was assumed to be. Advantage didn't come from action. It came from attention. The shift did not announce itself. There was no clear moment when someone could say that everything had changed. Instead, it arrived quietly, spreading through the room before anyone fully understood what was happening. The comfort that had settled so naturally only moments earlier began to feel slightly out of place, as if it no longer belonged to the situation. Confidence, which had once flowed without effort, now required attention to maintain. People sensed something was off, but the feeling was vague and difficult to name. This discomfort did not come from fear or threat. Nothing aggressive had occurred. No words had been exchanged. No movement had signaled escalation. And that was precisely what made the change so unsettling. The mind searches for causes it can recognize. When it cannot find one, uncertainty grows. People felt the atmosphere shift without being able to explain why, and that lack of explanation unsettled them more than any obvious disruption could have. What had changed was not the situation itself, but the story people were telling themselves about it. The narrative they had built relied on predictability and ease. It assumed that nothing unexpected remained. As long as that story felt intact, confidence remained comfortable. The moment that story stopped fully explaining what they were experiencing, confidence lost its foundation. The calm presence of Bruce Lee did not align with the assumptions that had been made earlier. He did not behave like someone waiting to be acknowledged, corrected, or dismissed. He did not adjust himself to fit the role others had assigned to him. Instead, he remained exactly as he had been from the beginning, composed, steady, and unconcerned with how the room interpreted him. That consistency created a contradiction the mind could not easily resolve. People expect underestimated individuals to signal discomfort, impatience, or a desire to be recognized. When none of those signals appear, the original judgment begins to feel incomplete. Calm that does not seek validation suggests something deeper than passivity. It suggests self-possession. As this realization began to surface, the room subtly recalibrated. People became more aware of their own reactions. Movements slowed, expressions tightened slightly, conversations lost their looseness. The comfort that had once felt earned now felt borrowed, as if it depended on a story that was no longer holding together. The most unsettling part was that no one had done anything wrong. There was no mistake to correct and no action to respond to. The discomfort came entirely from internal awareness catching up to reality. People began to sense that their earlier assumptions had been too simple, too final, and too quick. This is how psychological shifts often occur, not through confrontation, but through contradiction. When behavior does not match expectation, the mind struggles to reconcile the difference. The calm in front of them was not passive. It was intentional. That intention did not announce itself, but it became harder to ignore as time passed. The story people had told themselves began to fracture quietly. It did not collapse all at once. It loosened at the edges. Small doubts appeared. Why does this feel unfinished? Why does the calm feel deliberate rather than accidental? These questions did not need answers to do their work. Their presence alone weakened certainty. As the atmosphere continued to change, people realized that the moment they thought was over had never actually ended. They had simply stopped paying attention. Now that attention was returning, it returned with hesitation rather than confidence. This hesitation marked the shift. The room had moved from assumption to awareness without knowing exactly how it happened. Comfort no longer felt reliable. Confidence no longer felt automatic. Something important had changed, even if no one could yet articulate what it was. That is why the shift was so difficult to explain. It was not caused by action, but by presence. It was not triggered by conflict, but by restraint. And it quietly dismantled the narrative that had once made everything feel predictable. The story they had told themselves no longer worked, and once a story stops explaining reality, it cannot hold power for long. Awareness did not return gently. It snapped back with urgency, as if the mind suddenly realized it had been absent at the exact wrong moment. The shift was immediate and uncomfortable. People became conscious of the fact that they had stopped watching too soon, that they had mentally stepped away before the moment had finished unfolding. That realization carried weight because awareness that returns late does not arrive with calm, it arrives with tension. When attention comes back too late, it brings discomfort with it. The mind scrambles to catch up to a situation it no longer fully understands. People begin to replay the moment in their heads, trying to identify when they disengaged and what they might have missed. That internal scramble creates unease, not because something dramatic has happened, but because certainty has quietly vanished. They began to understand that nothing had gone wrong in a visible way. No one had been challenged. No confrontation had taken place. No force had been applied. And yet control no longer felt secure. The confidence they had relied on moments earlier now felt misplaced. It became clear that control had not been taken from them. It had been surrendered. They had not lost control because someone overpowered them. They lost it because they assumed control was permanent. They believed it did not need to be maintained, monitored, or protected by awareness. That assumption felt reasonable while comfort was present. Once comfort disappeared, the flaw in that belief became obvious. Control depends on attention. It exists only as long as awareness remains engaged. The moment attention drifts, control weakens. People often mistake calm for control. believing that nothing happening means everything is under control. In reality, calm without awareness is fragile. It lasts only until something subtle shifts beneath the surface. As awareness returned, people began to sense how much they had missed. Small details that had gone unnoticed now felt significant. The posture they had ignored, the composure they had dismissed, the silence they had misunderstood. These details had always been there, but without attention, they had no meaning. Now they carried clarity. What made this realization especially uncomfortable was that no one could point to a single mistake. There was no obvious error to correct. The lapse had been internal. Attention had simply wandered away, and because it wandered collectively, no one noticed it happening until it was too late. This is why late awareness feels so unsettling. It does not offer a clear solution. It only reveals that the moment has moved ahead without you. The mind recognizes that it is no longer aligned with what is happening. That recognition produces urgency, not action, but heightened sensitivity. People become alert again, but now they are reacting rather than observing. Throughout this shift, Bruce Lee remained unchanged. He did not adjust to the renewed attention or respond to the discomfort filling the room. He did not acknowledge the mistake because he did not need to. The mistake was already visible to those who had made it. Bruce Lee did not reveal the error through words or action. He allowed it to reveal itself. The absence of reaction left nothing to distract from the realization that awareness had been abandoned too early. Without confrontation, the truth stood clearly in front of everyone. As people became more alert, they also became more cautious. Confidence no longer felt effortless. Reactions slowed. Movements became deliberate. The comfort that had once carried the room had vanished, replaced by a quieter, heavier awareness that demanded attention. This is the cost of late awareness. It restores perception, but without the comfort that once accompanied it. The mind is awake again, but now it understands that it fell asleep at the wrong time. That understanding lingers longer than any dramatic event could. The moment did not need explanation. It taught its lesson without instruction. Control is not something you establish once and keep forever. It must be maintained through presence. The instant presence fades. Control begins to slip away. By the time awareness returned, the room had already changed. The opportunity to remain aligned from the beginning was gone. What remained was understanding, arriving late but undeniable. That is what happens when awareness returns too late. Not failure, not defeat, but the quiet realization that the most important thing you stopped doing was watching. The lesson did not arrive with drama, noise, or spectacle. There was no clear moment of victory, no visible loss, and no reaction that could be pointed to as the conclusion. Instead, understanding settled quietly, the way truth often does when it does not need to be defended. Nothing outward announced that a lesson had been learned, yet something internal had shifted for everyone who was paying attention again. What became clear was not a revelation about strength, but about perception. People realized that seriousness does not always look serious. It does not always carry intensity on its surface, or demand recognition through display. Sometimes seriousness is calm, sometimes it is restraint. Sometimes it is the absence of reaction rather than the presence of it. That realization alone challenged how the moment had originally been judged. Capability revealed itself in a similar way. It did not introduce itself or explain its presence. It did not seek validation or rush to be seen. It remained intact regardless of whether it was acknowledged. This challenged the assumption that power must announce itself to be real. The moment showed that true capability often exists quietly, waiting not for permission but for others to exhaust their assumptions. The most uncomfortable realization was how easily important moments are missed. People understood that the most costly errors rarely come from making the wrong move. They come from believing no move is necessary at all. When people assume that nothing important is happening, attention drifts, and with it goes the ability to respond intelligently. Reality does not pause during that drift. It continues shaping itself beyond the reach of those who have stopped observing. This understanding did not accuse anyone. It did not assign blame or create embarrassment. It simply clarified what had already happened. People had not failed because they misjudged Bruce Lee. Misjudgment alone is common and correctable. The deeper failure was disengagement. The moment people decided they no longer needed to watch was the moment they lost alignment with what was actually unfolding. That distinction mattered. Underestimation can be revised. Attention, once withdrawn, cannot be retroactively applied. By the time awareness returned, the moment had already moved on. This taught something subtle but lasting. Attention is not optional when clarity matters. It is the foundation of understanding, and without it, even the most obvious truths remain invisible. The lesson did not need to be spoken because it was felt. People sensed how fragile certainty becomes when it is not supported by awareness. They felt the difference between comfort and control, between calm and vigilance. The moment exposed how often people confuse ease with understanding and familiarity with truth. What stayed with them was not fear or admiration, but perspective. They recognized that some of the most decisive moments in life do not look decisive at all. They pass quietly, leaving behind only the consequences of whether attention was present or absent. The absence of drama made the lesson more powerful, not less. Nothing had to be proven. Nothing had to be demonstrated. The moment taught without words that awareness is the real advantage, and that once it is surrendered, no amount of confidence can replace it. People did not lose because someone else acted. They lost because they stopped watching. That understanding lingered long after the room returned to normal, because it applied far beyond that moment. It applied to every situation where comfort invites distraction and certainty silences curiosity. And once that lesson is truly understood, it is difficult to forget. The moment ended quietly, but what it revealed was unmistakable. Nothing remarkable marked the end of that moment. The room did not freeze. No one spoke a final line. Life simply continued, as it always does, carrying people forward as if nothing significant had occurred. Yet something irreversible had already taken place beneath the surface. What changed was not the situation, but understanding, a quiet realization, settled in that awareness is never guaranteed, and control is never permanent. The moment people decide they have seen enough is often the moment reality begins to move without them. Attention, once withdrawn, cannot protect what follows. This was never a story about intimidation or dominance. It was a reminder about vigilance, about how easily comfort dulls perception and how silently important moments slip past unnoticed. True presence does not demand recognition. It waits, intact, while others drift away. The room returned to normal, but the lesson did not, because once you understand that awareness is the real advantage, you never forget how costly it is to let it fade.